I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Banks, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
The average cost of a four-year degree has tripled over the last 4 decades. Meanwhile, in 2021, Harvard University grew its endowment by $10 billion. Dr. Gillen, why haven't schools flush with cash like Harvard used a small piece of their profits to lower tuition cost?
I think it fundamentally has to do with the nature of competition in higher education. And we've got 2 Harvard teachers right here, very, very distinguished ones, I might add. The way you become Harvard is you accumulate a massive endowment, and the goal is to create the perception and hopefully the reality of high academic excellence in every field. And so the way you do that, you accumulate endowment. You don't spend, or you don't admit everybody. You're very selective about who you let into the college. And so you combine this, and you've got basically a very rich institution that is kind of cream skimming the best students, and then we all kind of agree that it's a great school because of that. No offense to you guys, but that might not be the case. There might be a community college out there that's doing
a $53.2 billion endowment. I mean, isn't that absurd? I mean, I'm baffled by it. That why couldn't that money be used to lower tuition cost?
Harvard absolutely could just waive tuition for all their students if they wanted to. They could probably waive tuition for all students in Boston if they wanted to.
Maybe throughout the entire United States of America, $53.2 billion. So why should Harvard be entirely exempt from paying any federal income taxes on that $53 billion endowment?
That's a great question. I don't know. There was a small change to an endowment tax, essentially, on the return on investment. I think it's 1.4% that applies to some endowments. I don't know if Harvard is caught up in that or not, but that law could be updated.
Really crazy. Relatedly, a 2021 Heritage Foundation report found that the average U.S. university has 45 full-time staff dedicated to DEI. Some schools pay full-time salaries to over 150 DEI staff. Meanwhile, the average cost of a 4-year degree has tripled over the last 4 decades, and that's even accounting for inflation. Mr. Horn, how can policymakers make sure that universities use federal funds to prepare their students for the workforce instead of wasting tax dollars on DEI offices?
Well, the increase in DE&I officers is really part of a larger trend, right, of the administrative overhead that Dr. Gillen spoke to earlier. And administrative costs as complexity and trying to be all things to all people and all priorities and so forth have caused colleges and universities to accumulate cost and spending. If we had a more coherent policy framework on the front end that prioritized outcomes and value for students and taxpayers, then colleges and universities would prioritize investments that focused on those things. And I think we would see some real gains in terms of student outcomes and value over time.
According to the same report, universities now have 1.4 times more DEI personnel than tenured or tenure-track history professors. Are academic departments today forced to compete with DEI offices for resources?
As a history major, I don't know the answer directly, but I think there's no question, again, that the support structures and administrative accumulation around colleges and universities has just driven up the spending problem. And so it's very popular to talk about tuition pricing and costs to the student, but that's fundamentally a symptom of costs at the university and a spending addiction that continues to snowball.
Yeah, I think the answer is obviously yes. Dr. Gillen, you mentioned how schools see virtually no limit to the amount of money they spend on this kind of stuff. Non-teaching administrative DEI staff have especially benefited, with many of them making over $300,000 annually before bonuses. Why do colleges feel justified in tacking on these kinds of programs when they're not tied to measurable learning outcomes?
Well, I think that last part is the key, is that we don't know the quality of colleges in most instances. And so as a result, whatever faction is most powerful on any given campus is going to have an advantage when it comes to divvying up their resources. So on some campuses, it's going to be the DEI offices. On some campuses, it's going to be the football team. And so whichever faction is most powerful gets the biggest slice of the pie.
At least the football team is bringing revenue in for the school. With that, Madam Chair, I'd like to enter this report from the Heritage Foundation titled Diversity University DEI Bloat in the Academy from July 27, 2021 into the record.
Without objection.
My time has expired.